McMiniman's Edgefield 6th Annual Brewfest is happening this month, June 21st to the 23rd. That's where you can spend 3 whole days celebrating all things hoppy, malty, and delicious. You'll be able to enjoy a selection of over 100 of the Pacific Northwest's finest craft beers and ciders at one of the most beautiful outdoor venues in our state. You can bring chairs and blankets, family, friends, and even your pup for an afternoon with great brews and live music. Plus a barbecue with the brewers themselves on Friday night, where you'll have first dibs in trying all of the beers. Go grab your tickets now at mcminimans.com. You might have heard that commercial properties in Portland, like office buildings and apartments, are going for super cheap, which is kind of confusing because how are all these buildings so cheap and so many new apartment units going empty, but yet here we are stuck in the middle of a seemingly never-ending housing crisis? It's not adding up. So today on CityCast Portland, we thought we'd just bring in a developer to explain through their business what's actually going on with the Portland real estate market. And not just any developer, but the guy who's made some of our city's most recognizable buildings, like the Zipper Food Court on Northeast Sandy or the colorful and controversial Fair Hair Dumbbell on Northeast Martin Luther King Jr., or one of my favorites, the Tree Farm, which is the bright blue building covered with potted plants that's visible from the Morrison Bridge. Those and many, many more were built by one of the city's most creative and prolific developers, Cavenaugh of Guerilla Development. He's giving us an update on how the Portland real estate market is really doing, how it connects to our housing crisis, and where we need to go from here. And spoiler alert, he's really, really optimistic. It's Tuesday, June 11th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Tell us what kind of developer you are.
I'm a shitty one, but I'm smiling all the way. But I try my damnedest. I was trained as an architect, and I realized that as an architect, I was going to have the small chair at the table. The people who held the purse strings, who held the money, the clients, rarely were the smartest people in the room, but they were the ones who were making all the decisions, and it was infuriating to me. So I'm like, well, I took a couple of them out to coffee. Took one, Francesca Gambetti. She's still in town. Awesome. She was a client of mine when I worked downtown at a firm. And over a 20-minute cup of coffee, she explained how to be a real estate developer. And I'm like, that's it? And you don't need a license. You don't need to pass a test. The next day, I got a business card that said I'm a developer. And it's really dumb, Claudia. It's A plus B equals C. And all those things combined, say it's $1 million. If you're a successful developer, what it's worth is more than $1 million. That's it. Like that's as dumb as it can get. The way I work tends to be that dumb. I mean, when I try to get complicated, I always trip. Like the Zipper is a really simple, dumb, beautiful building. And I'm proud of it. And that's when I'm at my best.
I do want to interject just because I know you're very self-deprecating, but I got to say that the one theme that tends to run in most of your buildings, aside from them being colorful and like really interesting to look at, is that it does feel like you're building community inside. Like I live next to one of your business squares that you made over here on Lombard, where the Garrison is and now Pastificio.
The 2/3 project.
It's where I hang out almost every day. Like I love that space. It feels wonderful. And I feel like you do a good job kind of bringing that vibe. And I feel like that's very Portland. We're all about community and coming together and like sharing a drink, some food. We like hanging out. And like your buildings are like built for hanging out, So I don't know, Kevin.
Yeah. That makes me so happy, Claudia.
But it's true.
I love that you consider me a good developer, and I'm flattered by that. I just want to acknowledge how low the bar is.
Well, let's talk about this developing downturn that we're seeing in the city. Yeah. Like, is this unprecedented or is it just part of the cycle? Because 2008, 2009, felt similar.
Oh, it's flat out just a cycle. Like no one should be jumping off ledges right now because this is the end. Commercial real estate industry in Portland, Oregon right now. We are the worst market in the nation. Portland is.
Right now? Really?
Yep. Oof. Yep. And there's a little bit of good news in that. We're one of the few cities in the nation where wages are outpacing rents, and that hasn't happened since I've lived here for the last 35 years, that's a really good thing. That's going to make our city younger. That's going to make our city more vibrant. We are kind of losing our 1990s chutzpah. The canvas is blank again for the grit to come back, and all those 32-year-olds from Lawrence, Kansas to move here again because they can. It's such an entrepreneurial city, and that hasn't changed. Our DNA hasn't changed. Claudia, we're going to be so fine. It might not happen tomorrow, and it might not be pretty, but we're going to be fine.
That's so nice to hear from especially someone who I feel like is feeling the most depth of drowning right now. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I am like getting punched in the face, and it hurts like hell, but I love the city, and I'm proud of the city. So getting back to your comment about the communities in my buildings, that's really important to me. I don't think, the buildings that I design are good, but when I hand the keys to the right tenants, then they become great buildings. And the product that you live next to up in St. John's, that's a great building.
Yeah. Could you explain something to us? It's been reported that apartment buildings are selling really cheap in Portland. Like they're but we have a lack of housing. Like, how does all of this make sense?
You need an economist as a guest. You're right. You're totally right. But all the apartments that are getting built right now, they're all market rate. We have these 6-story buildings. They're in architecture, they're called 5/1s because it's 5 floors of wood frame construction over a ground floor of concrete construction. And it's the cheapest, most economical way to build, and you maximize it. So the bedrooms don't have a window. They're all these shotgun-style units. They're very dark. These are all one-bedroom units for $2,000 a month, marketed to a 26-year-old male software engineer who doesn't want a closet. There are literally thousands of those now, and nothing else. So those are just languishing and will languish for years and should languish for years. Like shame on those developers. That's where you just kind of look in the rearview mirror and said, hey, like Jimmy made a lot of money on that one. I'll just copy and paste what Jimmy did over here. Well, yes, it's like a pyramid scheme where like you're the last in. You're gonna get screwed. And I'm not crying for those folk.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah, an audit came out about all of the affordable housing that was getting built through the city, their incentives. And that's one of the things that were dinged was like, hey, there's too many 1-bedroom units or studios. And like, this isn't housing families. And that's what we're trying to house here,
Yeah.
So what's your business looking like today? Like, you've given us a lot of red flags, but like, how are the rest of them faring?
Kind of the same. The ones that are doing well are the ones that are nestled into the little villages around. Most of my stuff is close in East Side. And whether I own them or not, like the Zipper, I don't own anymore. I have investors. So I might own, 1/5 of it or a quarter of it. I sold my portion of the Zipper to the bar owners there at Pay Dirt. And they're fantastic. They're what made the Zipper sing. And they're really smart and lovely local business owners. So that's great. I sold Providore Market, their building, because they're just nice people, and their mortgage is the same as what they were paying me for rent. So it seemed mean not to sell it to them. So those buildings are doing well. The little micro restaurant fed buildings, or the little clusters of community. Jolene's first cousin is over on Southeast Gladstone and 28th. That's my first homeless housing solution. There's a coffee shop there and a couple little retailers. It's doing great. And by great, I mean it's profitable. And by profitable, I mean I make a couple $100 a month, literally. And I'm fine with that. So all these are all experiments for me. But you're right, the tree farm, that's my first ever foreclosure.
Yeah, that's the one that went to auction, yeah.
So just some math behind that, or if you're curious, when I finished the tree farm, it was 3 months before the state locked down with the pandemic.
Oh.
Great timing for a speculative office building, huh?
Yeah.
So it was worth $18 million when the final coat of paint was dry. And then it auctioned off earlier this year for like $4.5 million.
Oh,
so
man.
I can't do anything about that. Like that's like the tide. I'm not going to stop the tide. I can't stop that kind of math. That's beyond me. I still, again, like the dumbbell, I think the tree farm is actually prettier than the dumbbell. And over time, it's going to look like a huge chia pet. There's 57 trees bolted to the outside of the building, and they're in really great shape, and I'm super proud of that. It's a sexy little song, and I just adore it, even though I don't own it. Yeah, I don't own the dumbbell right now.
Oh, really?
Some really wealthy investor pushed me off the gangplank of the ship, and he did really well. It was a brilliant business move for him, but everyone else that isn't that guy got screwed. But I drive by the building, and it still makes me smile. It's my love letter to the city, one of many, and I just want to keep making as many as I can.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, a possible reason some of those storefronts in your neighborhood have been empty for years.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Well, I wanted to ask also, because we've been seeing a lot of like empty buildings, and it just seems like the people who own the buildings don't seem to really care about the neighborhood they're in. And so they'll go empty for years just because and again, this is speculation on everybody's part, that they would rather have the tax write-off than maybe rent stuff out below market or whatever, because we're not seeing people move in, and then we'll hear people be like, I tried to rent it, but they wanted way too much, And I don't know, like, do you know at all, like, if this is conspiracy or if this is an actual thing that happens?
You're mostly correct. So you are right that landlords are disincentivized to rent out their spaces at a lower rate. Say you own a house somewhere in Portland. Its value is based on the other houses up and down the street and the square footage of your house. And you have comps and all that stuff. A commercial building's completely different. A commercial building is valued solely on the income that it brings in. So one of the most lucrative buildings types out there is a self-storage facility. Even though the building itself is a little tin box of, just a little turd, it's super lucrative based on the rent per square foot that they charge for those things. And like the Benson Hotel, as gorgeous as it is, and the incredible woodwork and all the things that we value about that architecturally, is probably worth less. It is worth less than a similar sized self-storage facility like in a crappier part of town. It's insane, but that's how commercial real estate works. So if I am a traditional developer and I have a building and my ground floor is empty, and you come along and say, hey, I want to open up a boba tea shop. It's my dream. I'm really good at it. It'll be awesome, trust me, but I can only afford $18 a square foot triple net, to use my language. And I think that it's worth twice that much. Well, as soon as I sign a lease with you, by the way, it's going to be a 5-year lease. As soon as I sign a lease with you, my building just dropped in value because the income is just cemented in as low, even though I think that's short-term thinking. I will give you keys all day long, Claudia. I'll be like, here, boba tea, like you're going to show up at 7 a.m. and go in there and sweep and clean and turn the lights on and like add life to the streetscape. You're my lost leader. I'll give you a space for free for a year because I know it's going to be empty, because it'll be easier for me to rent out the space next to you if they walk by and see that you're popping. I don't understand why landlords, my guess is that there's pressure from their mortgage company. These are all big institutional companies.
To not devalue the building?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's not entirely the developer's fault. I mean, there are some lenders who have covenants in the loan that say that if the value drops below X, that the developer has to pay down the loan and maybe cut a check for $1 million to the bank. I don't want to paint such a black and white picture of evil developers out there, but it's not an industry known for being creative.
Yeah. And it's also not incentivizing developers to think about the community that they're partaking in.
Exactly.
I just wish there was a way that the city had a plan for that. Like if they could see what's happening rather than just partaking in that, because that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Like the city's like,
Yeah.
oh, we're just going to rely on developers and their instincts on what works. And it's like,
Oh,
well,
it's a horrible idea.
they don't really have the best intentions in creating communities, you know?
No. And a lot of the big developers don't even live in town. So here's a hot take. So Portland, you're probably already aware of this. We have the smallest city blocks in America at 200 by 200. That's a really good thing. For the longest time, institutional money, Wall Street money, ignored Portland because Portland's like a cute little backwater to them. But as soon as Portland became hip and cool and fun, and even on our small blocks, the towers got bigger, the rents got higher, Wall Street noticed. And they came in from out of town, and they have changed the face of Portland. And it was mom and pop landlords like me. And I can be creative all day long, but Goldman Sachs isn't interested in being creative. And if you go talk to them and say, hey, I want to rent a spot for my boba tea shop, you're talking to a local broker who talks to a 27-year-old at corporate who has 4 bosses. It's never going to happen. Mm-hmm. These buildings that you and I don't like very much are going to be the ones that suffer the most. And the quirky mom and pop folk that can be creative will ride this out.
That's good to hear.
And hopefully we scare away that big money for as long as possible so we don't see more, replications that kind of suck the soul out of the city.
If the city stops incentivizing them, Jesus. Okay, so let's say...
Look at you go.
Okay, you've been very positive about Portland and who will survive, but let's say you do go broke. Like, what happens next?
Oh, I'm going broke.
Man.
No, that's a certainty. I am losing it all. I'm talking to bankruptcy lawyers now. Never done that before. I'm learning a lot about bankruptcy law, and that's really bad. And not because I'm losing all my money, but other people will be hurt if that's the case. And that's what keeps me up at night. I don't lose sleep over my own money. I lose sleep over other people's money. And there are a lot of really good people in this town. I know way more good people than bad people in this town. This town is packed with amazing people. Side note, I forgot to mention this. Mm-hmm. This town has more good developers than any other town I know. There's some really, I'm not an outlier in this town. There's a dozen amazing people who wake up thinking, how can I make this city better? And they build things that make the city better. So we're really lucky here. But to answer your question, I'm going down.
Man. What about the atomic orchard experiment? Do you remember? Do you remember that? Like you haven't been working on it for years. Is it dead in the water? Because isn't the structure pretty much up?
Yeah. So when I say I'm going down, it means Kevin Cavenaugh is screwed, and I'm gonna come back. By the way, all I know how to do is play music architecturally. So someone took my guitar away, so I'll just start banging on some pickle barrels until I'll make music somehow. I'm not worried about that. But the good thing is even if I'm going to be devastated financially, the buildings aren't. So the Atomic Orchard experiment, I don't know who's going to own it when it's done, but it's going to be completed. It's going to be filled. The lofts are sexy as all hell. These things have 16-foot ceilings and spiral staircases, and your bed looks down over the living room.
That's awesome. Can you explain a little bit about it?
Yeah.
Because I know what it is because I've researched it, but can you kind of give a short little summary of what you were building? Because I think it's so cool.
It's on Sandy, the equivalent of about 26th and Sandy. It's experimental in a bunch of different ways, financially, architecturally. The structural engineering, we had to go to the big board at the state level to get the structural engineering approved because it's such a weird hybrid system. It presents as a 3-story building. So when you look at it, you see 3 stories. But each floor is 16 feet tall. So it is about the height of a 6-story building. And there's no elevator, but there are 8 accessible units in Atomic Orchard. Ooh. So as a ratio of society, I have way more units that can take care of people of all needs. The financial model which is crazy, which I love. This is a pre-pandemic model that's gonna be hard to make work, but I hope the folk who own it when I'm gone will still do this, but the intention is, say you are an investor in the building and you put in $100,000. Instead of a typical 8% dividend for you, instead of making $8,000 a year, you agree to half of that, $4,000 a year. And the money that we don't put in our pockets in profit, we're going to buy down rents artificially. And we're going to start out with 5, and then every year, as market rate rents go up a little bit with inflation, we will add another affordable rent apartment to it, a 6th and a 7th and an 8th, until we get to 50%. There's roughly 50 units in the building, so the goal is to have 25 of them be half price. Instead of $2,000 a month, half of them will be $1,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So I've created affordable housing with that. And the key is, this is my first legal discrimination project. I can't say that I won't rent to you because you're a woman or because you're Caucasian or because you're Christian or any of the protected classes. Mm-hmm. But I can say that I won't rent to you because you're a podcaster, or I won't rent to you because you're a lawyer, or I won't rent to you because fill in the blank. You chose your profession. Mm-hmm. That's not a protected class. So instead of saying who won't live there, I will hand keys for $1,000 a month lofts that are just badass as all hell. It's so damn cool. If you're a social worker working on the front lines of the homelessness problem in Portland. Mm-hmm. If every day you go downtown and you work your ass off doing what the rest of us can't even imagine doing, I don't care whether you're rich or poor. It's not about affordable housing. It's about me honoring what you do to make the city better. And if I can't find enough, then you and I can figure it out. If you're an investor, like what, school teachers, first responders, like who do we want to honor in this city that we need desperately,
within the city. Yeah,
exactly. It's the first legal discrimination project that I'm aware of. And I won't own it because of my bankruptcy, but the other investors will. And it'll be cool.
Yeah.
And the best thing is what it's going to look like. The paint jobs, I'm just working on that now with an artist.
I'm excited for that. I mean, and a big piece of it is because it was focused on making it affordable for social workers, for, educators. I just thought that was so cool.
Thanks.
Well, I'm curious, I know this is going to be a big question. You having the perspective that you have, the experience that you have, how would you go about fixing Portland's housing crisis? You're so passionate about, great feeling spaces, affordable housing, all these things. How would Kevin Cavenaugh, if you had the wand, how would you fix this?
That's a great question. And I would love to have that wand. I would study other cities that have done it right. And I would study history to see how it's been done poorly. So one of the first historic lessons we should learn is Cabrini Green in Chicago or Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis. These are old buildings that have long since been demolished because they were never successful. They were affordable housing projects, and they concentrated poverty. Mm-hmm. And you never break the cycle of poverty when you put 3,000 poor people in one building. It's a recipe for disaster. It's the most efficient way to create affordable housing, but don't let bean counters decide policy. So the first thing I would do was I would create as much affordable housing as possible, and I would have it peppered throughout the city. That's what they do in Northern Europe, and it shows that within 2 generations, you completely break the cycle of poverty. Whereas in America, you never break the cycle of poverty.
Because things are sequestered, because they're just this is where the poor people live.
Yeah.
Out of the sightline of the non-poors. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, it's across the street from me, and I might be getting this wrong, so I'm not knocking the developer, but there's an out-of-state developer who's building at the Pepsi blocks across from me at Atomic Orchard. And I don't like the designs. I think it doesn't look Portland, doesn't feel Portland. It feels like a pro forma with windows, all those things I was talking about earlier. And I heard that the city said, cool, you're mandated to put affordable housing at a certain ratio in your building. Now, what the developer negotiated successfully was that, okay, I'm building 6 buildings there. I'm going to put the poor people in one building, and the other 5 will be market rate. That's where the rich people will live. And the city said, okay. That's letting the developer, and there's some financial reason. It's more profitable for the developer to do it that way, but that doesn't make it right. It's like marrying Mr. Right versus, Mr. Right Now. That's a right now answer. to keep the developer going and to keep the economy rolling. But we're going to be suffering for that for generations.
Well, Kevin, last question here. You've explained a bit what you do, what other developers do. You've been very candid that things are not going well for you, but yet you seem so psyched still about Portland in the future. Like, what would you say to another person or business owner who's having a rough time right now in this city and may not have the enthusiasm you do? Like, what would you say to them?
Oh, that's a good question. This is a long game, not a short game. This is the most entrepreneurial city I've ever experienced. And sometimes it takes leaving Portland and going to visit your relatives in Peoria or anywhere else to realize that, oh yeah, maybe they don't have the homelessness issue we have. Maybe they don't have the fentanyl issues we have. They might have, but they have other issues. There's no good food, or everything's corporate. There's no perfect city. I think you'll find that you'll come back home and you'll realize that we're so inventive. We're so vibrant. We don't ask for permission to do cool things. We just do cool things.
It's so true.
Yeah. And it's in our DNA, and it's not, that hasn't changed. The environment that we work in, that we live in, the earth beneath us shook a little bit, and that was scary. And that still might be scary. But the citizens have already taken back the city. We're going to be more than fine. And it's, on some level, the reason I think you should stay is you're getting in on a new ground floor. There are commercial buildings that any of my tenants, I say, hey, you should be buying a building with an SBA loan with the 10% down, borrow the money from your aunt, buy a building, and 5-10 years from now, it'll be the best thing you ever did. Because this has never been a buyer's market city. I've lived here for 35 years. It's always been a seller's market, and the buyers are always screwed. This is the first time in 3+ decades where if you have money and you want to buy a building, there are deals out there. Claudia, you should like call me afterwards. Yeah, hell yeah.
I want to call you afterwards, Kevin. Well, Kevin, seriously, thanks for taking the time to explain so many details and answering so many of our questions. These aren't just mine. These are listener questions that we've gotten. Like, people are just like, I don't understand this. I'm like, yeah, I don't get it either. So it's really nice to hear from someone who's from that world, because it's like when you speak to city leaders about it, they don't know. And that's the disconnect with what's happening right now. So yeah, maybe the idea of getting a bunch of good developers in the city together is like what should be happening. Have they ever invited you, Kevin?
No, but there is a group of us that gather every month or so, and we always hang out in someone's backyard and we just talk shop. And it's pretty fun. It feels like a salon in 18th century France or something. My friends and I are hatching ideas for new buildings, and I know restaurateurs are hatching ideas for new eateries. I know tech companies that are hatching. I mean, there are coffee shops right now that have 3 people with as much enthusiasm sitting around them saying, hey, let's do this, and they're gonna friggin' do it. We're gonna be fine.
Two super quick things before we head out. Our midweek roundups will be on hold for a month because we're going to be bringing you some mayoral candidate interviews instead. It's also the reason we've skipped a couple these past few weeks. We've just been getting ready to bring you these really, really fun and exciting conversations. Also, if you missed out on grabbing some stickers from us on 503 Day, we'll be part of Sunday Parkways this coming Sunday. That's the 16th. So you can come on by and say hello. We'll be at a booth from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at Fernhill Park on Northeast 37th. Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.